we are now recording. So, hi everyone, and welcome to the closing session of our peer support programs for IMGs. I'm Catherine. I am part of the Doctors in Distress team, and today I'm also joined by my colleague Aileen. She is our comms lead, who will be here throughout to help monitor the chat. And I am also joined with Dr. Ananta Dave, Doctors in Distress Trustee and Chief Medical Officer for NHS Black Country Integrated Care Board, Dr. Arun Kishore, Consultant Psychiatrist, and Viv and Fiona, our wonderful group facilitators who ran the reflective practice sessions in this programme. Hopefully you've all attended sessions throughout the IMG programme, and today we shall be reflecting on the previous discussions and reflective practice sessions from the programme, including professional and personal stress, adaptation and discrimination. If you have any questions at all throughout the session, please do pop them in the chat or the Q&A feature, and we will do our best to answer all of them if possible. So for now, I am going to hand over to Ananta, and I will be here throughout to monitor the chat. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. As Catherine has said, I'm Ananta Dave, and although I'm the Chief Medical Officer for the Black Country ICS, I'm also a psychiatrist, and I still keep in touch with clinical practice. So firstly, delighted to be part of this discussion and this group here today. From whatever I can see so far, it's a small enough group for us to be able to have open discussions and for everyone to raise questions or air any views or clarify things, etc. So I'm going to be talking very briefly about my role, what I do, and then I will be passing on to my fellow facilitators, and each of us will speak for a few minutes about the work we've been doing and our role, and then we'll open it up for discussion amongst all of us. So I also am an IMG, an international medical graduate. And some of you might have heard me say this before if you've been in some of the earlier sessions. I came to this country around 27 years ago, just over 27 years ago, and I came from India. I had completed my undergraduate training and my postgraduate training in psychiatry in India. I'd worked there for a year. So my background has always been in public hospitals, publicly funded government hospitals in India. And then when I came to the UK, because I wanted to, at that time, specialize in child and adolescent psychiatry, which was not freely available in India. I think there were 1 or 2 centers. Secondly, I was interested in this model of publicly funded healthcare. And I felt I would be able to practice in such a setting more easily. And I think like many IMGs coming to the UK, my plans weren't initially to settle in for the long haul. In the UK, to settle in the UK, my idea was that I would do a few years of training and then return to India, where I would continue my practice. One thing led to another. I came here, I did my training, I did a rotation scheme all over again. So I started off as what we would call a locally employed doctor, or LED. Now, many of you might have those contracts either in the form of being called an international fellow, clinical fellow, trust doctor, trust grade doctor, specialty doctor, staff grade doctor. So you might have come in a variety of roles, or you might have come in for a locum trainee role. So it's a short-term contract for 6 months or a year. So these are all locally employed doctors. So they don't form part of a national training scheme or not part of national terms and conditions of service. So the conditions or the terms of employment are set by your employers. So I came in and as one of those doctors, as an LED, as you say, and I then applied for, was interviewed and got into a training scheme, which was the West Midlands, a Birmingham training scheme for SHOs in those days, as it was called, senior house officers. So the current core trainees were called senior house officers then. So I completed the Birmingham and Black Country SHO scheme and then was accepted into the West Midlands higher training scheme for child and adolescent psychiatry. So I completed my MRC Psych exams, completed my training, and then was appointed as a consultant child and adolescent psychiatrist in 2002. And for the first few years, for various reasons, I think partly I was just still evolving. My understanding of how things functioned in the NHS was just evolving. And I was a bit new to the country. I had a young family in those years. I was training and taking exams and appearing for interviews, and my children were born at the same time. So I think I concentrated on my clinical work and tried to work less than full time in order to have a good work-life balance with my young children. And I would go home, I would do my own calls, do my work and go home. Gradually it dawned on me that it's not a level playing field in the NHS, that things don't work the same way for everyone. And that for some people they face additional disadvantages, but that they also bring huge strengths to the NHS. So I, for example, felt very comfortable dealing with whether it was the long hours of work or waiting lists or a huge volume of patients, because this is what I'd grown up with. Studying in India does not mean it is the right thing to have happened, that we should have waiting lists. But for me, it was par for the course. But I realized when I came here that was not the case. People were seen in a timely fashion. I didn't see long queues running into miles outside outpatient clinics, and I didn't see waits for getting into hospital. So that was something new to me. So apart from the clinical conditions, I realized that people progressed in their careers or were successful in interviews at differential rates. So as I grew more confident in my role, I started wanting to do something. I felt like doing something about the inequality. So the things that helped me and that I did, and I'm just sharing this with you, is I became part of a network. So I joined an organization called the British Indian Psychiatric Association as a psychiatrist. That was what was available to me in those days. And slowly I started getting to know people from around the country, getting to know about working conditions elsewhere and what people were doing in order to deal with some of the problems that they face in their workplace. And also how they used their strengths, how they came together and nurtured one another, encouraged one another, and learned from one another. So I became part of a network. Over the years, I became part of other organizations like VAPU, which is the British Association of Physicians of Indian Origin. I think there are other such networks in the country. And so that's how I felt connected and felt as if I belonged. Afterwards, I also then started getting involved in hospital management, applied for various management-related roles. And I'm now the Chief Medical Officer for an integrated care system today. But for me, the learning points have been be part of a network, be connected, speak up, either individually or as part of a group if you can. And there are things you can do working within organizations or working with outside of the organizations in these networks that can help address some of the issues around inequalities. I've worked around race inequality, gender inequality, and things that intersect, and the inequalities faced by international medical graduates and locally employed doctors. Being part of Doctors in Distress as a trustee has also enabled me to engage with doctors in a different way and look at various ways of supporting doctors. So that's briefly about my role, what I do, and how I've developed over the years. In no particular order. I mean, I can see Viv on my screen first. So Viv, can I call you in, and then Arun and Fiona can say a few words as well. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome. And oh gosh, what to say? Well, it was. I was so glad to meet everyone. I'm not sure if you are in the meeting today, those who joined my group, but it was a really supportive and sometimes very uncomfortable group to be part of. As some of you described, some of the issues that you had to deal with when you started in your role and transitioned from the country that you might have come from. And what I really think was amazing for that group of which I was a part is the support that you were able to give each other, the ideas that you were able to give each other, and that I was able to contribute to those ideas, and that some of you took them on board in the time that we worked together, and they made a difference. And for me, that's fantastic, because my role is to support you and to help you make your lives, both in your work and your personal settings, feel happier and more constructive, and be able to make professional and personal connections wherever you might be. Yeah, I think that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Viv. Arun, do you want to come in?
I'm Arun Kishore, and I work as a consultant psychiatrist, general adult psychiatrist. And I was just thinking as Ananta was speaking that I'm now midway between two countries. I spent 16 years working as a consultant in India, and now 16 years here in the UK. My interest in issues to do with international medical graduates comes from my role here in the UK within my trust as for working as a SAS tutor, which I did, I think, for 14 years, or maybe a little less. As most of you know, large numbers of SAS doctors are international medical graduates. We started to identify career issues in them. The SAS doctors I worked with initially, where people have been settled in this country for some time, but yet they continue to struggle with integrating into the system. Career issues of progressing, issues of being sometimes subject to difficulties in their day-to-day practice, as Ananta mentioned, or as Fiona mentioned earlier, sometimes struggling with their consultants, power dynamics that come up. Over the last 2 to 3 years now, I've been running a Ballant group, something similar to what Fiona and Viv have been doing with IMGs here. So I've been running a Ballant group for international medical graduates. This came at a time when COVID started, and we were getting lots of people coming into the trust with very little support in a sense, and that support wasn't there mainly because of the context, the situation. And recently we did a sort of a review of what is going on in the Ballant group, and I'll possibly talk about some of that, what came out of the review later. But I think I'll stop talking for now. I'd be glad to sort of hear from everyone and sort of interact more than talk about myself.
Okay, thanks, Arun. Fiona, do you want to come in, please?
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I can only stay until 12:30, so apologies for that. So my role was also like Vivian, I was running a group to try and support people and to build up a network. I think one of the biggest things that we came across was people being able to attend. And I think in some ways that these sessions, the trusts need to start offering protected time. This needs to be part of their training program to come and have these spaces to talk, because people really struggled to get the time off. People were doing it in all sorts of covert ways to attend. And I think the way that you were talking about the contracts and employment, there's such a discriminatory two-tier system that really leaves people at disadvantage. And people talked about, changing jobs every 6 months. You then get lost in the mix. There's an assumption that you've been here for a long time and that you're not struggling. So I think there needs to be a special care and attention to international graduates. And also there are white international graduates as well who feel discriminated against as well. So it's very difficult to really talk about the racism, but also talk about the discrimination that everybody's feeling. A difficult experience I had was there were some doctors who were actually still overseas in their home countries, thinking about coming here, and they were very much met with the level of racism. And I wondered whether that was too much to hear. Do you need to hear this stuff before you come, or is it important to prepare for it? So that's one of the questions I've been left with. Thank you.
Okay, and that was very useful, Fiona, to set the context. Now, this roughly the next half an hour is, and I know Fiona, you have to leave at 12:30, but Arun, Viv, and I will be here. So roughly for the next half an hour, we want to hear from you. So because this is the last session of this series, it will be a combination of reflections from previous sessions, some particular questions that you all have wanted to discuss again or discuss further about, and also to look at what this can do to inform us about any future work that we do at Doctors in Distress. So is it, Catherine and Eileen, is it through putting questions in the chat that we're asking people to say what it is that they want to say?
Yes, please do put it in the chat.
So please do put questions, comments, or whatever it is you would like to share in the chat, and we'll try and pick up those. And we'll give it a few minutes for people to put something in the chat, because we would like you all as participants to set the agenda for this one. So let's just give it a couple of minutes and see what comes up in the chat. Thank you.
It's interesting for me at the minute because I feel as if our audience are quite invisible. And I suppose that was some of the difficulties that we find. People do find it very hard to be seen and to have a voice.
That's right. I mean, that's part of the, part of the way we organize in terms of virtual or Zoom sessions. And I think in each of the formats that we have, we lose something and we gain something. In a format like this, obviously, it allows people to be heard clearly without, there being any interference or, etc. But people might feel a bit hesitant to say something into a faceless situation. But if it is face to face, I think not, some more people would have been excluded from being able to attend. Now, please, there isn't any compulsion for anyone to put anything down or ask anything, and we appreciate some of the restrictions of this format. I'm going to start off, and Fiona, Viv, and Arun, please feel free to join in. I think just based on some of the conversations that have taken place in the previous sessions, I think some of the themes which have come up firstly are about adaptation and adjustment to the UK. So how do people come in and adjust both at a personal level and at a professional level? It works in different ways for different people. And I suppose wanting to know how that process can be made easier or what helps. So that is one of the things that came up. There were a couple of other points, but if we pick up this point first, any of the participants in the chat, if you would like to put any comments in or your views or any questions about this particular point, do put in. But also with Fiona and Arun, anything that you can remember from your previous sessions that you would like to share about this particular aspect?
From the experience in my group, one of the aspects of that transition and adapting is about in the community, and to find networks and friendships in the community, and how depending on where people were living geographically, it felt harder. But over the weeks, talking about this experience, some of the members of the group had been able to reach out to the community that they lived in, and actually some got quite a shock reaction. Others got a really supportive reaction and started to connect with people in a way that they hadn't anticipated. And they also learned that there are some sort of cultural quirks. So I'm thinking of being in the Northwest, Lancashire, which was where I was brought up. There were particular quirks of connecting with people that really had nothing to do with being somebody from another country, but to understand that Lancashire has a particular cultural way of communicating, and that would be true for someone coming from London or the home counties as well. They would have to kind of try and learn the ways of the locals, if you like. And that I found, and it was fascinating listening to the process that people arriving new to a certain area, what they'd experienced in that transition and trying to adapt. And in some cases, really enjoying that adaptation or trying to fit in with the local community.
I think in my group, there was a lot of conversation initially around the bureaucracy of the paperwork that needs to be done and being held up. And a sense if you tried to communicate with a trust with your own email, you wouldn't get any recognition. But if you had a trust NHS email, you would have half a chance of getting a response. But people shared a lot of techniques and kind of ways around this and advice for people who have been here longer of how to kind of meet this very difficult system.
Yeah.
An interesting bit, because my group is still running. It's been running for 2.5 years. I'm seeing phases within this group. First, when all of them came together, they were new to this country, and for them, it was about settling in. And I think what the group really found useful was that they could talk amongst themselves about, where do I get a driving license? How do I get a house? Where can I send my children? How do I get my car tire changed? Various things. Nothing to do very much with clinical practice initially. But it's when it's almost like Maslow's hierarchy. When that got settled, then the issues at work came up. And the issues at work were about trying to understand what's going on, because some of them in their first on-call, they were just thrown into the on-call sometimes. And others, didn't have that initially. It was trying to understand IT systems and also, how do you refer a particular patient somewhere? It's things that you feel incapable of asking somebody else, because there isn't anybody else if you're isolated and working alone. And the beauty of that group was that once they settled into a group, when somebody new came in and they started to raise the same issues, the group had ready-made answers for them. So it's almost as though they formed a sort of an induction package of their own, a very informal thing. But I'm sure Fiona and Viv will agree that the group is what is really, really supportive of each other.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, for me, what struck me, and over the years, what's changed, of course, is the power and the prevalence of social media, WhatsApp groups. Now, we didn't have a mobile phone, I think, when we came to this country, let alone WhatsApp. But so those things have changed. So technology has evolved to an extent that it can help people make easy contact, even when they are in their home country, and find out some things about practical aspects of adjusting, etc. But for me, I think what struck me, and I've worked both in a very diverse, urban, densely populated area near Birmingham, which is where I currently work, and also in a rural part of the country, predominantly white, like Lincolnshire, where, transport links and hubs are much more spread about, dispersed. I think, different ways of connecting and communicating work. WhatsApp groups are really important, but what makes a difference is when senior people or leads within an organization realize that the onus of helping people settle in and getting them to know their work conditions and people around them, the onus is on the employers. It should not be left to individual doctors or whoever it is who comes in to say, well, you sort yourself out. I'm sure you can find out a WhatsApp group. I'm sure you can find someone from, from your part of the world. I think the onus should be on the employers being aware of how it can feel tricky in the earlier weeks or months, and then helping them to settle. So while you have these informal WhatsApp networks, we also need employers bringing people together in various ways in order to help people settle in and make adjustments both in personal and professional life. So that's something that I wanted to share. But I can also see some comments coming in the chat. Do we need to pick any of those? Okay, Fiona, you're saying that you need to leave. Okay, and good to see some of the comments. Thank you, Nina. And anyone else, if you want to make any points, particularly about this phase of adjusting to the UK when you first come in, both personally and professionally, if you want to make any comments about this particular point, please do put some thoughts and reflections, etc., in the chat.
Do you know, Ananta or Catherine and Eileen, if any of the group had requested being put in contact for a WhatsApp group from this support group? Is it worth considering that? Has there been a plan?
Yes, so this will be captured in the evaluation form. So we are going to send out an evaluation form to everyone that attended tomorrow, and it will capture if you would like to be part of a WhatsApp group. And if you say yes, then we will get in touch and we will get one arranged for the participants so they can stay in touch.
Yeah. And Catherine, is there also something about asking the participants what has helped or not helped in areas where they are posted currently? How did they feel they were helped to adjust and adapt? Whether it was a WhatsApp group being set up locally or anything else that, say, their managers, medical directors, or IMG leads, or whatever, who have HR, human resources department, whatever it is that they found helpful, if people could put in that feedback form in the survey?
Yeah, of course. I will, when the evaluation gets sent out, I will make sure that will be accounted for.
I think Fiona has left, isn't it?
Yes.
So, right. Okay.
One of the things that came from our discussions in the British Indian Psychiatric Association was about there being at least one person within a trust.
Yeah.
We call them IMG leads or IMG champions, who could be an SAS doctor, who could be a consultant, but somebody who's appointed as being sort of responsible, who can then champion for them, advocate for the IMG group with the trust, and sort of act as a go-between between the trust management and the IMGs. I wonder what your thoughts might be on that.
That's true, absolutely. I think we did that in our trust, and I think more and more trusts are following that lead. And it could be either somebody within the human resources department or somebody within the medical directorate, a doctor. It could be a combination of the two. I think where things work well, the HR and the medical directorate work very closely together. I think it's really important. So it could be neither of those places, but I think having somebody who has got the responsibility for ensuring that IMGs are, supported as much as possible is a good idea. I just also want to say on that point that I don't know whether it was covered previously, but the General Medical Council, for example, does have this Welcome to the UK packages, which most people might have attended, which is, I think, a half-day or a one-day program. But they've also started trialing out, along with NHS England, an enhanced induction package for IMGs in some parts of the country, which is led by Professor Mala Rao. So I don't know how many people are aware, but Catherine, I think it would have I'm pretty sure I've circulated it a couple of times to doctors in distress. I'm happy to do it again, but there is an IMG induction program, which is an enhanced induction program specifically for IMGs, which was trialed by NHS England and GMC together, which some trusts in the country have adopted. And it is useful for other trusts in the country to be aware of this and see what it is they can do in their places of work. So that's something which can be shared. And the other thing which I know I've definitely shared, happy to do it again, is the Royal College of Psychiatrists induction guide. Now, while this was prepared by the RC Psych for psychiatrists, it is generic enough to benefit a whole range of trainees from all specialties. So it is something that trainees from other specialties can have a look, or trainees or even doctors, even if you're not a trainee, whatever role that you've been appointed to. This is for IMGs who've come recently to the country. So you can have a look at this document and take away some of the generic points from it, which are of relevance to all IMGs, regardless of which specialty you're working in. So these two documents can be circulated, Catherine, to participants of this program, along with the survey.
Thank you, Ananta. Yeah, if you just circulate that to me, I will get that sent out to.
Yeah, and if you could just keep that in some repository somewhere, so it's there as part of the resources of DID, so we don't have to, it'll be there for us to use the rest.
Thank you.
So can IMGs, Ananta, that are already in the country access the GMC enhanced induction for themselves, or does it have to go through the local trust that they happen to be working for?
It is generally done through local organizations, because it has to be specific to that trust or that area, so people are made aware of what the processes are, who the people are, and what the arrangements are in that part of the world. Having said that, if nothing else is happening in their part of the world, they might say, well, I've heard that, in the Midlands, they're organizing this. I'm in the east of England. Can I join the Midlands one? Just so that I'll get some idea at least. So it shouldn't be very prescriptive. It shouldn't be exclusionary, but it is generally tailored to cater to what's happening in a particular trust or locality, because then it's going to be more specific.
It sounds like there's a kind of expectation on the IMGs to actually search it out. So long as they know that this exists, they can then approach their medical HR and say.
I think that's the whole reason why I was saying that the onus should not be on the people who come. It should be on HR and management, and reason why we are circulating those links. I think that's what I clarified right at the beginning. The expectation should not be on people themselves to sort things out. It should be on, this whole adaptation process begins with the managers, the trust, and HR being aware of their responsibilities. If they are getting IMGs into their part of the world, what is it that they should be doing to help people adapt? That's the first point.
I had a thought there, and I entirely agree with you. I don't think it should be down to the IMGs themselves to actually look at. I don't think they would know what needs to be done. But I was also wondering if a trust has IMGs who've been there for 6 months to a year, I'm sure they could contribute to the development of that induction package. Because they would have their own thoughts about what they needed and they came in, and then that might help people who are coming in later.
Exactly. I think just to go back, it's not prescriptive. It's not one set thing which then says this is exactly how it should be. The whole idea for it being local is so that it can be adapted to local needs. And if you have IMG champions, part of their role is going to be look at what induction do we need to have in our organization. Now, that might be something that you develop yourself entirely locally, or you might take inspiration or help from this national enhanced IMG induction package that's been created. The point being, there should be some flexibility. It shouldn't be fixed and prescriptive, but it should be, the leads, the people from within the organization who take the initiative and say, look, let's do what we can to let people settle in. But as has been discussed, that does not negate the importance of informal networks like WhatsApp groups, which people might themselves set up. And that's fine. I mean, that's an important part. But the organizations have their own responsibilities, which they should be doing. I mean, they should be aware of developments that are going on in the world of IT. It should not be for us to tell them they should be aware, but certainly we can circulate the links, and the trust can make what they want of it and adapt it. Just conscious of time, I also know some other points that came up in previous sessions, and one was about, I think, apart from adaptation, it was about progression. Is it career progression? And the other one was about discrimination. I think we've touched upon, fact that discrimination can exist, and that, we need to be able to speak up about it. Viv, sorry, I know Fiona has left, sorry. Viv and Arun, do you have thoughts about how do we address this issue of discrimination that IMGs may face, whatever their background, whichever part of the world they are from? What is it that IMGs can face in terms of discrimination, and more importantly, what can be done and what's out there?
I'd like to address the second part of that, Ananta, which is, what can be done. And one of the issues I've seen with the group that I work with is their awareness that this is actually discrimination. They feel that there's something not right, but they don't know, because they might come from countries where hierarchies are stronger, and they've sort of just taken blows all their lives. And then when they come here, they sort of expect that same sort of thing to go on. But making them aware that there are ways that this can be addressed. And then, how that, for example, bullying, I think, or racial discrimination, which could be from patients, it could be from colleagues, it could be from people who are higher up in the hierarchy, and then how that could be addressed. And I think the ability to speak to somebody confidentially is very, very important. So the awareness, knowing the pathways where that could be addressed, or maybe even taking it outside the trust to organizations like DID, where they might get more advice on this.
Yes, I agree, Arun. In the group I facilitated, one of the members spoke about what they thought was potentially bullying. And what was really helpful was that it was explored in further detail with everyone in the group, with that person. And they were trying to decide, is now the time to address it, to take it up? But I think that by the time the conversation and the dialogue had been teased out a bit, it was felt that it was about being at the right time for them. And they had to deal with their anxiety about what it would mean for them to raise it. And they needed a bit more confidence. And I think being in the group and discussing it in the group helped build some confidence for them that actually it was appropriate, but it's about the timing for them to raise it. And I think that both matters, to know that you're right to raise it, but also knowing what's the best time for you, because you don't want it to harm yourself. Because I think anyone raising bullying, whether it's to do with discrimination or any other form of bullying, can really put you in the spotlight.
Yeah, that's true. And I think, Arun, that point you raised about having a trusted somebody to talk to, whether it is a colleague, whether it's a peer, whether it's a manager, whether it is, somebody in another department, somebody outside the trust.
Your volume is going a bit.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right. Sorry about that. I think Arun's point about having somebody trusted to talk to, whoever they may be, whether it's a fellow, colleague working in a similar situation, whether it's a manager, whether it's somebody from HR, or indeed somebody from another organization, really important. And I think for me, the other thing also is that while experiencing discrimination at the beginning of your career can be extremely demeaning and extremely demoralizing, do not internalize this feeling that because you've experienced something like this means that it sets the tone for the rest of your career. You can have awful experiences, but recover and go on to do whatever it is that you wish to do in the UK. So don't let the first experience, give you a negative message about yourself. But also please know that while discrimination in various forms exists, that there is now more awareness of it, both within organizations at a national level, in voluntary organizations like Doctors in Distress, etc. So there is awareness of it, and there are things being done about it, because people realize, at the very least, if you are getting doctors in to work in the country, looking after them is going to be an important requirement of making sure they're able to provide good care. And secondly, that looking after people with respect and dignity is important in its own right. It's the right thing to do. So there is more awareness, there is more accountability, and there is more transparency and scrutiny. So I think those are important things to remember, and that each organization should be paying heed to its legal responsibilities as well under the Equality Act, to make sure that they don't tolerate or accept discrimination in any form. So that's the bit of it that's important. Let me just read this comment. And these are well aware of the racism. The problem is their colleagues who gaslight them when they bring it up. Yes, Nina, thank you for putting that point through. And I think that is all the more reason why at least one person whom they can trust and who believes them is really important for them to be able to take this forward, even though people are trying to deny its existence or trying to interpret it in some other way. And I would say this is also the situation where allies can step up. So there are some of us who have privilege with respect to that. So either we do not belong to that group of people who have historically been discriminated against, or we are in a senior enough position to have withstood that and come out the other side. So I think in all these situations, it's important for allies to step up and to realize, I may not have experienced it, I might not be part of the group that gets discriminated against, but it is for me to stand up and support those who are trying to speak up about it or do something about it. So I think having the group of allies and having one trusted person is really important, so that you're able to counteract people who might try and deny that it exists. I don't know if Viv and Arun want to comment.
Well, I would like to add to that, because I mentioned before the webinar started that I'm involved in being part of interview panels for medical trainees on their progression. And I was disappointed on the one hand with a recent interview panel I attended, but on the other hand, I've been really feeling quite confident about certain changes that are happening with certain, I think, younger senior medical colleagues who have come through the system and are aware of the differences and the challenges for IMGs. And I was part of this interview panel where the interviewers were actually acknowledging the importance of being aware of that need to change or transition and adapt for IMGs, and the questioning, taking that into account, how they listened to the person, which was very different from what I'd been seeing previously. So I think there are some really positive changes that are happening, but maybe it's not across the nation yet. And I think it just has to keep going.
Okay, so there is a question here from Raj, and it says, thank you, Viv. Is being on the interview panel for medical trainees a paid post? How do I apply to be in the interview panel? I'm a GP.
Oh, you'd have to contact your local deanery, I think, and it's part of the interview panel process for hospital trainees. These are hospital trainees rather than GPs. So, yeah.
I think they do call out for expressions of interest, Raj, when these national training scheme interview rounds are run. So you should be able to apply now. I don't know, and Arun, I don't know whether you're aware. I think when it comes to interviewing hospital trainees or specialty trainee posts, or specialisms, if you like, I think they do go to people who are working in those specialties. And for GP trainees, similarly, they might be going to GPs. But I think this issue that you've talked about, Viv, is prevalent across all. It's not restricted to any one specialty or hospital or GP, or it's prevalent across all. So as the GP, Raj, when GP trainee interview rounds are held, I think you have every right to approach your local deanery and say, I would like to be on the panel for GP interviewees, and see what response you get. But thanks for showing that interest. I think it is so important and shows the importance of being part of the change, isn't it? I think that's the only question that I can see. Eileen?
I'd like to come back to the very important point that Nina raised, that sometimes when we feel distressed in a particular situation, other people in the same post would have felt equally distressed, but may not have spoken about it. And there's often a culture of silence. And I think that's the issue that you're raising. And that's when it becomes important to actually step out and maybe talk to somebody who's impartial, who's not in that situation. Run it past them to see whether this is just something that I feel, and what should I do about it. Because it is otherwise one gets caught up in that culture of silence very often.
Yeah, no, very true. And I think, Arun, just following on from that, apart from having people in management positions or IMG champions, etc., also the importance of informal mentors, coaches, somebody who can support you, as you said, who can act as a sounding board, who can provide that non-judgmental safe space where you can feel able to ask any question, where you wouldn't be thought of as either being difficult or ignorant or sensitive or whatever, all the various labels that people unfortunately get labeled with if they're trying to raise awkward questions or difficult questions. I think if you have somebody in that role whom you can go to and say, as you said, I think that gives the people more hope. I think, Nina, I just want to say that for the person who's going through that experience of being gaslighted, it is incredibly stressful. But just taking it across the board, there are more and more people now speaking up. So everyone who speaks up might not get the kind of response that is right. But when more and more people speak up, the culture slowly changes. And the chances of it being ignored or tried to be brushed under the carpet becomes slightly less. So for each and every one of you who is in their own way trying to change the culture, be aware that every little makes a difference. Whatever you do in your own sphere, whatever you do to support one another person or talk about when you're silenced, I think each time it makes a difference.
And I think it makes a difference that all of you joined these seminars and support groups to enable doctors in distress to take forward any recommendations and changes that they would suggest. I think that's another way of changing the system as well, what doctors in distress do.
That's true. So, Catherine, I just wanted to ask, do we have a list of all the various diaspora organizations? So, organizations, we have a network of doctors for people originating from different parts of the world. Now, not every part of the world is covered, but for some of you, if you are looking for a network to join or somebody whom you want to connect with, if you have a list, I mean, it's not this is not exclusive. You can join whichever of those organizations. You can sort of, contact them and say that you want to be a part of it. As I said, there's not an organization that covers absolutely every part of the world, but there are networks out there which some of you might be interested in. So as part of its work, Catherine, Doctors in Distress can collect a list of those organizations and again circulate it.
Yeah, that's not a problem. Thank you, Ananta.
Okay, so I can't see any other questions or comments. So Arun and Viv, I think we've come to the stage where we are going to be, closing the session and gathering any final remarks, etc. Is there anything else that you both would like to say apart from what's been said, or even Ellen and Catherine, if you want to say anything that you want to at this stage to close the session, please do come in.
Sure. Thank you, Ananta. And yeah, thank you everyone for attending the program. We hope you found it really helpful and useful. And like I said before, an evaluation will be going out tomorrow to help us capture some more feedback. And along with that, I will also distribute some resources as mentioned by Ananta earlier today for you to have a look at. I will also put in the chat my email address in case you do have any further questions and want to get in contact. And I've also linked our Eventbrite where you can go and follow us so you can be notified or look at any upcoming and future groups that we've got, which may be of use. But yeah, thank you all, and thank you so much to Ananta, Arun, Viv and Fiona and Aileen.